All right, man, peace. You know, brother, sports is a lot like life. You make a decision here, a mistake there, and it may take you down a path that will help you find out what your destiny is supposed to be. You may have walked into the wrong classroom or into the wrong office on your first day of school or your first day of work and met the woman that you've been with for the last 15 years. In sports, you have the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are known for winning 4 Super Bowls in the 1970s. Well, if Franco Harris does not catch the Immaculate Reception, their whole history may have been different. In 1981, the San Francisco 49ers, they faced off against the Dallas Cowboys in the NFC Championship game. And Joe Montana rolls out right. And in order for him to throw the ball out of bounds, he has to throw it high over Ed Too Tall Jones. But by some sports miracle, Dwight Clark jumps up and grabs it out of the air for a touchdown. And it leads to the first of San Francisco's 4 Super Bowls. I'll never forget in 1996, I believe that it was the ALCS, the American League Championship Series. The Yankees were playing the Baltimore Orioles in Yankee Stadium. And I think it was Derek Jeter who hit a long fly ball out to right field. And a little boy named Jeffrey Mayer reached out over the fence and grabbed the ball, and they still called it a home run. That may have changed the entire series had Baltimore won that game. And that event led to the Yankees going to the World Series in 1996, defeating the Atlanta Braves, and then, of course, going on to win 4 championships in the 90s, or in that era, because they won in 96, 98, 99, and 2000. In the 1999-2000 NBA season, the LA Lakers won 67 games. They had Phil Jackson as their head coach. They go up 3-1, I believe it was, in the Western Conference Finals against the Portland Trail Blazers, a team that to this day, from top to bottom, may have been the most talented team in the history of the NBA. Their problem was that they did not have an alpha. Had they had a real alpha on that team, we may have never heard of the dynasty of Shaq and Kobe. Because not only were the Trailblazers able to come back from a 3-1 deficit to tie the series at 3, they went to LA for Game 7 and built a huge lead going into the fourth quarter. But due to the fact that nobody wanted to take command of the offense, they choked and gave the game away. And that's one of the games that many of the conspiracy theorists will say, well, the refs were in on it, so on and so forth. You have to understand something. And this is in any forum. When there's a favorite and you happen to be seriously challenging the favorite, you have to execute down the stretch. And Portland didn't do it because they didn't have an alpha. And Scottie Pippen was on that team. They had a lot of very good players, but no great offensive players. That team had Steve Smith, had Scottie Pippen, had Rasheed Wallace, they had Bonzi Wells, they had Arvydas Sabonis. I mean, they had very good to borderline great players out the wazoo, but they did not have that one player who could take it over. Michael Jordan is on record as saying that he watched the 1994 playoffs while he was playing with the Birmingham Barons. And when he watched the Bulls struggle against the Knicks in the second round in the 1994 playoffs, he would watch TV and be frustrated because he knew that they did not have what they needed to get over the hump, which was him, because he was the closer. Now, Scottie Pippen and Rasheed Wallace, they have 2 of the highest basketball IQs in the modern history of the NBA. Rasheed Wallace is probably the most underrated basketball player of the last 30 years. When it comes to archetype, not playing style, but archetype, he's in the Dennis Rodman mold, meaning what? Whenever he comes to your team, or whenever he came to a team when he first came into the NBA or around his prime, there was about a 10-year stretch that wherever Rasheed Wallace went, the team that he went to challenged in the playoffs or challenged for a championship. And if you were to ask Tim Duncan or Chris Webber, Dirk Nowitzki, Kevin Garnett, Sharif Abdul-Rahim, or any of the great power forwards of that time period from the late 90s to the early 2000s, they'll all tell you that Rasheed Wallace was considered a peer of all of them because of his phenomenal skill set as well as his unbelievable basketball IQ. But still, they were unable to get over the hump in that Game 7, and that changed the history of the NBA. So anyway, Rasheed and Scottie are going to explain why they choked, and of course, I'm going to chime in.
All right, so we remember you guys back. I gotta have a little Trailblazers reunion here during the break.
I'm an honorary Blazer.
Right, I was gonna say
Steven Jackson would have fit in perfectly on that team. They were known as the Jail Blazers. That squad, because that was like a reincarnation of a team with the bad boys type of mentality. Those late 90s, early 2000s Portland Trail Blazers.
Steven was like, I would have fit in well with those teams, right?
Yes, he would, because of all the technicals.
Right, exactly. And I got to bring this up. The Lakers series in the 2000 Western Conference Finals, 7 games. That was an insane. The whole way through was insane, but Game 7 in particular was insane. You guys.
I think they also had Damon Stoudemire on that team. That team, that Portland Trailblazers team, they had so much talent. They just didn't have one great offensive player.
You guys went into the fourth quarter with a 15-point lead.
Yeah.
Our friend Steve Smith has talked about the fact that if he could go replay any quarter of his life, it would be that quarter. What do you guys think when you think back to that moment in time?
They choked. They folded under the pressure. That's what happened. I remember watching that game like it was yesterday. I will never forget that game. That comeback was something to behold.
If we would have just made 1 or 2 of those 13 straight shots we missed, it could have been different. It could have been different. But, I mean,
nobody wanted to take over.
It was a great series, great game. To be honest, I don't regret it. I don't regret it because it made me better as a ball player and a person. And Pippen and I were talking about this earlier. I learned a lot of things from him coming to Portland, and I'm glad that he did.
Scottie was a great floor general, a great leader, but he was not good in the fourth quarter.
So, I don't regret it.
And when I say a great leader, I mean for that team. He was also a very good co-captain on the Bulls, but he didn't have what it took down the stretch of games to tell his teammates, get out the way, give me the ball, I'm going to take us home.
Anything that happened during that series, but if I could have changed one thing, it would have been to make at least 1 or 2 of those 13 straight shots we missed. And myself, I missed at least 6 or 7. It was pulling for.
Rasheed has such a high basketball IQ, but that dude had no self-control on the basketball court. He swore that every referee was out to get him.
For y'all, man.
Yeah, I know. We had everybody pulling for us, but Rachel, I mean, that was our first year. And normally, I played with the Bulls, had to battle through the Pistons to get to the title and stuff like that. And it was our first year, and everything was new. We were new to each other, and just somehow down the stretch of that game, our chemistry fell apart. And we were always an unselfish team and willing to pass the ball. And
that was your problem. You guys were unselfish to a fault. That Portland Trailblazer team, they're one of those equal opportunity teams where they had about 5 or 6 guys averaging 18, 17, 16 points a game. That's not what wins championships. It's really not. When we look through the history of the NBA, those type of teams very rarely win championships. You have the 2004 Pistons, and other than that, just about every championship team in the modern era has had a 25 and up point per game score. Just about every one. Somewhere from 22, maybe the lowest 22 points a game. But championship teams, they always have that guy who has to take the ball down the stretch of games and take the team home.
And be so given. Yeah. I think it just kind of hurt us at a moment when we didn't want to have to deal with it.
In other words, nobody wanted to take over. We didn't want to have to deal with it. What does that even mean? It's Game 7 of the Western Conference Finals. We didn't want to have to deal with it. Nobody wanted to assume the position of the alpha.
We started trying to want each other to have success.
Right.
No, you played hot potato.
Right.
And it kind of hurt us at that moment. But had I known that and known my teammates better, I would have been a different leader in that situation.
Okay.
Well, you know what, brother? Respect for taking culpability, but at the same time, it's just not in your DNA to take the game over down the stretch. It's not in your DNA.
I don't have any regrets. I love all these guys that I played with wholeheartedly. Steve, I would love you too.
My idol.
They were great teammates, and I do regret that we didn't beat the Lakers.
Well, I mean, man, that would have been good. And with all respect to Reggie Miller and that Pacers team, you got to think that if you guys had gotten to that finals, you would have 7
I had a
rings.
great chance.
That would have been a very good series. That would have been a great series. But I would not have put it past the Pacers to defeat the Trailblazers. Because once again, both the Blazers and the Pacers were down 3-1 against that 2000 Laker team. But people forget, that series between the Lakers and the Pacers was very close to being 2-2 if it were not for Kobe Bryant's heroics in Game 4.
On your hand. There's no question about it. What was it like to be inside the locker room with the two of you guys?
I'm surprised they even recognize each other. All that damn weed smoke that must have been going on in that locker room.
With these two guys, guys on separate teams.
Well, you played with both guys.
I played one game.
One game in Atlanta with Stack.
But it was awesome because, as Pip said, they're team guys. I learned things from Pip. I learned to be more patient out there on the floor with myself and others.
I don't think I've ever heard you use the word patient before.
Yeah, I mean, it's
people don't know that. He was mellow on the court. People really didn't know that. He wasn't wild like that.
I cut his text down from 4 games to 2.
Rasheed Wallace, the first player ever to get 4 texts in a game, right?
That's a big drop.
That's a big couple for him.
There you go.
Basically, that's what
that's
happened.
why you took it on.
I
You
started
absorbed
taking
it.
texts just because I didn't want him to get a text.
Well, because you needed him on that court. Absolutely.
And
Great team
both of
player.
them, it was that perseverance.
Right.
Neither one of them going to give up,
Yep.
no matter what the score says. And that was a good thing about playing with Jack, with him being a little bit younger than me, and we were in Atlanta. Man, we were rubbing our hands together like, all right, what are we about to do? We knew that, and we said this from the beginning. Okay, it's impossible for Atlanta to make the playoffs now.
Right.
But at least we can mess it up for everybody. That was the thought. Exactly.
Now, things did end up working out for you that year.
Yes,
I'm going to say that. But it was fun to see you guys even for a little brief moment. All right, coming up, we're going to...
But anyway, that's basically it on that. I just like this little segment because it took me back in time almost 20 years. It's unbelievable, man. Wow. That Game 7 was almost 20 years ago. Time flies, don't it? But anyway, peace.